Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. I'm super excited to announce that today's video is sponsored by the Cookie Countess. They specialize in edible airbrushing products, stenciling, and pretty much any other cookie decorating product that you can think of. And if you want $5 off of your next order, then use Sweet Dreams 5 at the checkout so that you can experience all of these wonderful products that I'm going to be showing you today. So this is my first order of business here. Yeah, that thing is so broken and I'm so excited to try out this new airbrushing system. What I'm doing here is I'm lining up all of my cookies to make sure that I know how many cookies I want to make and what type of stenciling I'm going to use for each cookie. Today's video is actually going to be two parts. So the first part here is showing you how I utilize the airbrushing machine and all of the stencils for the sugar cookie decorating. And then the second part of the video, which is a shorter part of the video, is going to be focused on stenciling with glitter, edible glitter, on cupcakes. So first off, we're going to start with this cookie cutter, and you won't believe where I got this cookie cutter from. That video is going to be coming up, but for now, let's just focus on the decorating portion. So I'm just taking some black royal icing that I have, and it's a little bit loose. It really doesn't actually matter too much what that texture is. You just want to make sure that it's not super thick, because then it's going to be too dry and those glitters will not adhere to it. Now, we're not actually going to be doing any stenciling on this cookie, but I wanted to include it as part of the Halloween collection. I love a good skull cookie. It's just that right amount of creepy, but you can also incorporate the glam. Now, you certainly don't have to put any glitter on there. You could just ice it as normal, but I like to have those eyes a little bit more sunken in, which is why we paint on that royal icing instead of piping it on. Moving along to the next cookie, whenever you're stenciling anything, you want to make sure that your base is completely dry. Using pipe and flood consistency to base ice is probably going to be the very first step, but do make sure if you're trying to get other things done throughout your day, maybe you're making a cake or cupcakes, that you do this first so you have ample time to have this nice and dry so that when you're ready to stencil and you're ready to airbrush, nothing is going to indent. I say this because I actually end up indenting some of my cookies by accident. Yes, even after all this time, that can still happen, and sometimes I'm just clumsy and I end up bumping things. Now, if you've never made sugar cookies before, it really is just a series of decorating things in the right order. So you'll notice that I'm leaving certain spaces blank. This is because I want to get that puffy icing look. Now, if you're not really sure what I'm talking about, what I mean is I don't want to just outline everything and then fill it in with a loose kind of filling. I want to have everything the same consistency. So you can go ahead and check out my video on piping and flooding in the right-hand corner, and that will help you come up with the right texture that you need for this technique. But I've left certain panels empty so that I can fill them in later on once the icing has dried. If I fill it in right away, then everything is just going to meld together and I'm not going to see that definition. I generally like to use tipless piping bags, and you'll notice there that I was using a little cookie stand to decorate my cookies on, but for the most part, I generally just decorate directly on the pan because I'm constantly using my pans to dehydrate the icing. Now, what dehydrating does is it just solidifies the top layer of the cookie enough so that I can get these details in without everything kind of mushing together. To get the colored royal icing, I just use a little bit of Chef Master or Americolor food gel in there. I always go a little bit lighter because I know I'm going to be airbrushing. And it's always easier to put color back on, and you really can't remove color. A system that I like to use is I whip up all of my royal icing in my stand mixer to make sure that it's the right consistency, and then I take smaller bowls to mix in that color. Now, the reason that I do it this way as opposed to actually getting my stand mixer to do the job is because, well, first of all, you don't want to over mix or over whip your royal icing, and this can sometimes happen, especially when you're trying to get all that color mixed in with the stand mixer. And then the second reason is I don't want to have to keep cleaning out my mixing bowl. If I were to mix colors in there, then I would have to constantly clean it out and make sure that it was ready to go for the next color. I'm going to let those other cookies set, and this one is now completely dry and ready to go. So I'm going to take a little bit of gold luster dust mixed with a touch of vodka, and then I'm going in and really making sure that I'm directing this around all of those indentations. This makes sure that I don't have to use any more frosting or anything to get all of that detail. I can just use the paint. And if you don't want it to be shiny metallic, then go ahead and go in with an edible paint or some dust instead. Now you can use royal icing on these parts, but I really want to make sure that I maintain the integrity of all of these little details. So that's why I'm going in with paint directly on the cookie instead. I'm using just a little bit of white edible paint, and although it's coming out very bright white, I actually take a little bit of that gold that's left over on my brush and kind of lightly brush it on some of the areas so it doesn't look as perfectly white, since this is supposed to be kind of like a spooky skeleton. I'm using a very small piping tip, and this is a petal tip that I'm using, and I'm just creating little half rainbow arcs to get this little rose on top. I have lots of tutorials where this whole thing is a bit more slowed down. If you want to check it out, I'll put it in the right hand corner. Oftentimes, I will just pipe directly on the cookie when possible, and I do want to make mention that I have thickened up that royal icing considerably. I added several tablespoons of icing sugar and a few tablespoons of meringue powder, and then I made sure to re-whip that in my stand mixer. It's always very important that you have the right consistency whenever you're doing something that's very puffy like this. Then I went ahead with that airbrush, and then I put a little bit of that gold edging on the rose just to make it stand out a little bit more. Now, the Cookie Countess gifted me with all of these wonderful products. This first one here I am super happy with. It is a giant airbrushing mat. And then here we've got our edible airbrush system. I like it because you can control the pressure that you want to use. Remember earlier how I talked about how I had nicked some of my cookies? Yeah, you can kind of see it on that one there. The Cookie Countess also sent me an array of airbrush colors, so I'm going to be testing these out too. And they also sent me this really great screen. Now we'll see how good of a job it does with preventing any pooling and how cleanly it can make this stencil. I really should have directed more of my airbrushing towards that center portion, but there is no pooling on this whatsoever. I was really happy with the clean cuts of that stencil airbrushing. Now let's try out the system just by doing good old-fashioned airbrushing, no stenciling. This comes out really beautifully, and because it's not broken like my other airbrush system that I used to have, it's really coming out very nicely without any of that back spray that I sometimes got before. Now I'm doing kind of two separate themes for my sugar cookies, and it's actually going to be part of a larger Halloween treat video, but today I really wanted to focus on all of the things that I was stenciling. So the ones that I'm doing here are all kind of for the fall collection treat box, and I love the mixing of the colors, and I love how well the Cookie Countess's airbrush colors mix together, and they don't just end up all like kind of brown. You know, when you mix too many things at once, it can sometimes do that. It dries fairly quickly, so you're able to layer things nicely and have each of those colors really show up. Whenever you're airbrushing, you always want to make sure that you start off quite light, because as I mentioned before, you don't want to get into a situation where things are just going to be pooling everywhere, and you also want to make sure that you are not getting too much color on there that you don't want on there. So always start light. It is always easier to go and add things. Now, I have a cookie screen that I've used before. What I really like about this one is that no matter how much color I'm putting on there, it's not getting oversaturated and then falling underneath, which can sometimes happen. So if you do find that happening with whatever cookie screen that you're using, just give it a little bit of a wipe and you should be good to go. Now you can choose to airbrush wherever you would like, but I like to airbrush near the edges, and I also like to airbrush near any indentations as well. Now this next part, guys, I am a work in progress when it comes to this. I haven't used a whole lot of multi-stencils before, meaning stencils that have 3 or 2 parts to them, but the key to it is making sure that you're really lining everything up perfectly so that all of the different stencils will show up properly and in the right place, or else you're going to get really just crazy stencils that are all over the place. Now we're moving along, and you'll notice that I stenciled those things first so that it didn't matter what kind of airbrush got on there, and then I can cover it all up with the frosting of these cupcakes. And again, I'm using that system where I want that puffy icing, so I'm only doing certain parts of the cupcake first, and then I'm going to fill it in later using that dehydration technique. While those are setting, let's try out our stencils in a different way. So I'm taking some really thickened royal icing, and I just wanted to show you guys this because this might happen to you when you use your stencil for the first time. I knew already right off the bat that this was going to be a problem, only because my pumpkin isn't a flat surface, but I will show you how I fix that later. So this one works a lot better because I'm using a perfectly flat surfaced cookie, and I'm scraping this all off. I was being very, very careful with this. When you get really good, you're going to be able to just one swipe it, and you're not going to need to do that several times like I did. By the time I got to this Hello Fall cookie, I was doing much, much better. I also want to mention that I did get that cookie scraper off of the Cookie Countess website a little while ago, so definitely go and pick one of those up if you are going to be doing this type of stenciling. Alright, so your cookie isn't fully ruined just because you've got some black splotches on there due to the fact that you didn't stencil properly in the first place. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use that as my guide, and I'm going to pipe on those details, and it ends up kind of looking shadowy and cool. So in the end, it did work out, and I did want to try that stencil out one more time, and it did work a lot better on this one because obviously the surface was nice and flat. Going back in, filling in those cupcakes, and I'm going to put on some of these eyeballs. These eyeballs are actually really cool. I'm going to show you a little trick with them in a different video, but yeah, really, really fun to have those ready-made instead of having to go and just pipe them on yourself, which you can also do in a pinch. Filling in this jar here. Now I know Witch's Brew could also be on like a little coffee cup. That would be cute too, but I decided to just go with the standard Witch's Brew, which I just thought would be served in a mason jar and have a bunch of eyeballs on there because why not? Putting on these last few details here, just really dotting it on there. You could use sprinkles as well. Make sure that you're fairly quick when you're putting those sprinkles on that royal icing though, because it will set up on you. I'm also going to add some leaves here. I do like the look of just Hello Fall on there with the stencil, but I thought it was begging for some leaves. In order to create these leaves, all I'm doing is I'm squeezing and I do kind of a little dot. Then I stop squeezing, but I drag that piping bag through just so you get kind of a nice leaf shape, and it's really, really easy to do. I find it just gives a little bit of a different texture and look than when you're actually using a leaf tip. And I am using the consistency that I used for that royal icing rose earlier, but you can honestly go a little bit looser of a consistency. A few finishing touches for our little monster eyeball cupcake here, and you guys know I've got to add more glitter on here because why not? I'm using the silver color on this one, and I was using that gold color on the other ones. Using that same gold luster dust mixed with a little bit of vodka. If you don't want to use vodka, you can use lemon extract as well. Anything that dries quickly and fairly tasteless. And then I'm just going to go and paint that on. And here are our finished cookies. Let me know down in the comments below, would you want the Hello Fall version or would you like the spooky Halloween version? I personally would not do any custom orders for this. It would only be a stock order between $4 to $7.50 Canadian each with no minimum order. Moving along to our cupcakes, I'm just using a really great chocolate cupcake recipe. Use whatever recipe you see fit. You could even go with a box for this one, whatever you desire. And I'm going to be making Italian meringue buttercream for this. Now, for the stenciling part, I really think that possibly American buttercream might work a little bit better. I just really love the taste of Italian or Swiss meringue buttercream, so definitely go ahead and use whatever buttercream you see fit. Now, when you're applying your buttercream, I recommend that you do it with a rounded tip and try to make it as flat as possible. And what I'm doing is I'm going in here and I'm squishing it directly onto the stencil. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this into the refrigerator, and I kept mine in overnight, but Italian meringue buttercream will kind of solidify up a little bit more after about an hour. And then I'm going ahead and I'm placing on glitter on there. Now, for Italian meringue buttercream, I do find it somewhat necessary to kind of keep those in the fridge for a bit just so you get it really nice and flat. You could try it without that, but I find that when you're trying to place on that glitter, it might just look a little bit bumpy, but I think it could work without any setting time as well. Make sure that whatever surface you leave them on when they're flat is non-stick, and then go ahead and add whatever decor that you would like on there. I love these. I think they look really, really classy. In future, I might actually put these on parchment instead of the non-stick mat, just so there's no other kind of texturing on there. For these cupcakes, again, it would be a stock order. I don't think I would do any custom orders for this, and it would be $5 Canadian per cupcake with no minimum order. It really depends, though, how you're doing your stock orders. If you guys end up using any of the Cookie Countess stencils that you see here in today's video, then please follow me at SD Bake Shop on Instagram and tag me in that photo or send me that photo, and you could be the next featured subscriber submission of the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!